The city had just finished weeping that night. The New York streetlights cut sharp, lonely trails through the near-empty avenues, reflecting off the slick, black pavement after a quick drizzle. They didn't just illuminate the street. They created shimmering, elongated streaks of light that twisted and flowed like broken silver rivers through the midnight landscape. The air was a heavy, intoxicating blend of wet asphalt and the lingering, faintly sweet steam from distant food carts, a scent both utterly familiar and subtly menacing. It was the kind of atmosphere that gave Emily a deceptive feeling of safety, while an electric current of raw anxiety coiled deep in her gut. Emily pressed forward, her pace brisk and deliberate, her knuckles white against the worn leather of her messenger bag. It was the last artifact, a single, tangible thing she'd saved from the tiny sixth-floor walk-up she and Mark had once shared. Each of her quick, sharp footsteps echoed a solitary rhythm on the sidewalk, a harsh counterpoint to the panicked tempo of her own heart. Every shallow inhale felt like a countdown, an urgent drumroll leading to a moment she'd been both desperate for and terrified of. She wasn't just chasing a ghost of a man. She was hunting for the final, devastating truth about her own life, the one she'd been chasing for months. She stopped abruptly in front of a small, discreet storefront. The sign above, barely visible, read "The Last Stop." It was a name that had always felt like a grim joke, and now, a prophetic warning. This was the place. The last coordinates of Mark's physical presence before he vanished. His image burned in her memory. The slight, crooked half-smile, the distant yet impossibly deep eyes pools, that seemed to contain 1,000 untold secrets and a lifetime of shared sorrows. A bitter knot of fear, worry, and a treacherous, blinding hope tightened in her stomach. She swallowed hard, pushed down a wave of nausea, and shoved open the heavy wooden door. The sharp, brief jingle of the entry bell was immediately overwhelmed by the potent, comforting aroma of dark roast coffee and stale pastry. It was the scent of all the late nights, the silent confessions, and the promises they'd made and broken. The cafe was a warm contrast to the cold street, lit by soft amber bulbs that cast long shadows across the scarred wooden booths. Emily headed straight for their booth, the one tucked into the back corner, their designated territory where they'd plotted their impossible future until the sun came up. She slid into the seat and dropped her bag with a hollow thud. Her eyes went immediately to the window, watching the streetlights bleed across the few clinging raindrops. The city was hushed, almost holding its breath, leaving her with the sounds of the wind, the distant whine of a cab, and the manic beat of her own pulse. Everything was achingly normal, and that mundanity felt like a tightening wire around her chest. A steaming mug of black coffee, strong, bitter, and scalding, appeared on the table. The jolt of caffeine woke her system, but the memory of Mark was the only thing that held her focus. She vividly recalled the day he left, the almost casual cruelty of how he'd turned his back, stepping over the threshold, leaving behind a vacuum she hadn't known how to breathe in. His last look across this very table, the deep-set eyes watching her, the smile that flashed and vanished like a faulty neon sign, it was the moment that had scarred her, the one she could not, would not, forget. She sat motionless, letting the low, melancholic tones of a jazz-age standard wash over her, blending with the clink of porcelain and the hushed whispers of the few remaining patrons. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, trying to ground herself with the familiar scent of the cafe. Time felt artificially stretched, each minute thick and heavy, loaded with the certainty that the other shoe was about to drop. Then, she heard it. A light, deliberate set of footsteps approaching the door, cutting through the music. Her heart rocketed into her throat, a desperate, sickening thump. Her hand instinctively squeezed the leather of her bag. A wave of ice-cold apprehension mixed with a ferocious excitement washed over her. A sudden draft snaked through the door as it opened, yanking her back to the present moment. Emily's eyes snapped open. She scanned the scene, the empty velvet seat opposite her, the dim lighting, the vague figures moving in the street. Everything was still. She took a sharp, painful sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through her chilled fingers, the bitterness stealing her resolve. It could be Mark, or it could be something much worse. But Emily knew there was no going back now. She was at the last stop, and the final confrontation was about to begin. Emily remained frozen, her hand still clamped around the leather bag, eyes locked onto the suddenly gaping doorway. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, so loud she felt the vibrations deep in her chest cavity. The approaching footsteps, low, deliberate, echoing across the worn wooden floor, ratcheted her anxiety to an unbearable pitch. A figure stepped into the spill of amber light, a damp trench coat glistening with residual rain. She held her breath, unable to flinch, every nerve ending screaming, primed for the moment of impact, Emily. The voice was a low, familiar rumble, infused with a shock of genuine surprise. It was him, Mark. A blinding physical current shot through Emily. A jolt that threatened to buckle her knees even though she was seated. Her heart hammered against the wall of her chest, trying to escape. For a few agonizing seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All the empty months, the corrosive loneliness, the desperate, foolhardy hope, it all compressed into this single, agonizing moment. Mark, is that really you? Her voice was thin, reedy, barely a whisper. She leaned forward, studying his eyes. The same deep pools where she had once found solace, passion, and the terrifying shadow of secrets unsaid. Mark closed the remaining distance with deliberate caution. His steps measured, as if afraid the slightest movement would shatter the fragile atmosphere. Yeah, I had to come back up. I don't even know where to begin, he confessed, his voice low and heavy. Each syllable weighted with unspoken history. Emily felt her pulse spiking dangerously high. Her hand shook as she reached for the rim of her coffee mug. The steam rose, warm and aromatic, but she was barely aware of it. The periphery of the cafe, the bar, the other patrons, the street noise all blurred into an insignificant smudge. There was only him, and the violent, beautiful chaos surging inside her. Emily, I am so sorry for walking out like that, Mark sighed, the sound ragged and raw. I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing for both of us. But seeing you now, I realize how monstrously wrong I was. A strange, painful combination of relief and sharp, burning resentment flooded her. She wanted to scream at him for the months of silence, yet she yearned to cross the table and bury herself in his arms. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met his. Mark, for every hour of those months, I tortured myself, wondering if you'd ever walk through that door again. I don't know how to process you being here tonight. Mark slid his hand across the table, stopping just inches from hers, a silent, agonizing promise of connection. Emily, I know words are cheap right now, but I need a chance to fix this. If you can give me that. In that suspended moment, the entire coffee shop shrank. The world reduced to the two of them, and the dark, scarred wood of the table, the smooth jazz, the distant clinking of dishes, the overpowering scent of roasted coffee, yet all converged, amplifying the vulnerability between them. Emily took a necessary, grounding sip of her coffee. The familiar bitter sweetness washed over her, mirroring the chaotic mix of hope and fear in her chest. A small, trembling smile finally touched her lips. We can try. But Mark, you have to be honest. Completely and utterly honest this time. Mark nodded once, his eyes burning with resolute intensity. I will, I promise you, Emily, this time. I'm not running. Emily drew in a deep, cleansing breath, feeling a tentative warmth spreading from her core to her fingertips. She knew this single night was a pivot point. It could be the chance to mend what was shattered, or it could unleash an old pain she wasn't remotely prepared to confront. She glanced around the cafe, suddenly realizing that every sound, every shadow, every scent was acutely more vivid. The distant footsteps on the pavement, the subtle rattle of a sugar packet, they all felt momentous. She was hyper-aware, recognizing that the next few moments would define her future. Mark gently lifted his own coffee cup, a gesture of shared intimacy. A drink, then, to a new beginning. He offered her a genuine hopeful smile, something she hadn't seen in too long. Emily managed a faint nod, raising her mug and taking another sip. The comforting heat spread through her, igniting a fragile but fierce belief. Tonight, everything changes. She sat perfectly still, her gaze locked on his, her heart beat slowly, tentatively syncing with his own in a timeless pocket, a place where the past and the present violently collided, and where all the fear and hope fought for dominance. Emily remained paralyzed, watching Mark's silhouette through the cafe glass. The light rain continued, each drop sliding down the windowpane, blurring the city lights into abstract streaks of color. The cafe was suspended in quiet stillness, broken only by the low, melancholic brass of the old jazz tune. But in Emily's chest, her heart was a furious, deafening drumbeat. Mark drew a visible, bolstering breath, then walked slowly toward her. He stopped just short of the table, his posture radiating exhaustion and anxiety. I honestly don't know where to start, he admitted, his voice low and heavy with dread. It's been too long without a word, and I wouldn't blame you if you told me to walk right back out. Emily bit her lip, the action tasting metallic, a heavy ache blooming in her chest. She remembered the sheer gaping emptiness after he'd gone, the endless, desolate nights, the anonymous feeling of loss. But seeing him now, standing right there, her heart betrayed her, screaming that the connection had never truly faded. Mark, Did you come all this way just for an apology? She asked softly, her voice wavering slightly but holding a firm edge. Or, do you want something more than just absolution? Mark held her gaze, his eyes earnest and painfully sincere. Emily, I want more than that. I need to explain, to prove that the man who walked out that day isn't the man standing here now. And more than anything else, I want to figure out how to start over with you, if you'll allow it. Emily lowered her head, looking into the dark pool of her coffee. The rich, warm aroma offered a brief, familiar comfort against the storm brewing inside her. She took a profound, steadying breath, then lifted her eyes back to his. I want to hear your story, but Mark, you have to be completely honest. This time, no more half-truths, no more disappearing acts. A faint, fleeting smile touched Mark's lips. He took a seat across from her, settling his gaze deeply into hers. He started to recount the lost months, the dangerous decisions, the overwhelming isolation, and the sheer debilitating loneliness he'd endured. Every syllable he spoke was layered with regret, self-reproach, and an unwavering, persistent love. Emily listened intently, her heart oscillating between sharp pain and fragile relief, acknowledging the ugly history, yet recognizing the intact core of their genuine affection. Emily, I don't expect instant forgiveness. I only ask for the chance to show you I've changed, and that I'm ready to earn back every single shred of your trust. Mark pleaded, his voice a warm, low cadence. He moved his hand, stopping just short of touching hers. A silent, humble promise, giving her the full power of decision. Emily's hand trembled slightly, but she didn't withdraw. She focused on the warmth radiating from him, letting the torrent of emotions, fear, hope, belief, and anticipation wash over her. She finally spoke, quietly. I'll give you a chance. But Mark, everything has to be out in the open. We can't navigate this in the dark anymore. Mark nodded, his eyes shining with relief and fierce resolution. It's a deal. This time, I promise. I won't let you down. In that moment, the cafe settled into profound silence. Only the low, lingering jazz, the soft patter of rain outside, and the sudden, harmonious rhythm of their two hearts remained. Emily realized this was the actual starting line, the volatile intersection where the past and present met, and the next move would define their future. She looked at Mark, absorbing the honesty and determination in his expression. Her heart felt both lightened and intensely expectant. She knew everything was about to change: their love, their trust, and the painful path to personal maturity they were now forced to walk together. Emily and Mark remained fixed across the small wooden table. The distance between them was close enough to feel the subtle warmth of shared breath, yet vast enough to hold all the fragile uncertainty they had yet to bridge. She felt the rapid, unsteady rhythm of her heart, her every shallow breath mingling with the still coffee-scented air of the cafe. The smooth jazz standard continued its low, insistent plea from the antique speaker, but to Emily, everything was muted, just the quiet friction of two hearts trying desperately to find their way back home. Emily looked at Mark, her eyes mirroring a raw mix of apprehension and profound longing. You still nurse your coffee like that, huh? Like it's the last cup on earth. Her voice was soft, intentionally steady, a conscious effort to dismantle the high-tension wire between them. She studied him, noticing the glint of longing in his eyes, the lingering discomfort, but also a bedrock of resolute determination she hadn't seen before. Mark managed a faint, melancholic smile, meeting her gaze with a tenderness that made her ache. Yeah, tonight, I want to sip it slow, to savor this moment, to savor the fact that you're actually here. The simple honesty sent a warm, unexpected blush crawling up her neck. She placed her trembling hand near the edge of her mug, inhaled the deep, rich aroma, and scanned the room. The pale gold light painted their figures onto the damp floor, their twin shadows flickering like the reflection of an old story being vividly brought back to life outside. The unrelenting pulse of New York continued, the occasional taxi headlights streaking past, the traffic lights blinking red onto the rain-slicked street. But inside the little cafe, time had slowed to a near halt, focusing entirely on the reunion of two people who had been adrift for too long. Emily felt every ragged breath, every tiny tremor of emotion, aligning itself with Mark's presence. Emily, there's so much I need to explain, and I don't know the sequence, Mark continued, his voice dropping to a serious, almost reverent murmur. He drilled his gaze into hers, attempting to convey the full weight of his sincerity with every word. I broke you. I know that I can't undo the last few months, but I can damn well be better starting now. A profound, weighted silence fell over Emily, a mix of old hurt and new, terrifying relief. All the pain, all the hope, all the regret was all culminating here. She took a deep, steadying breath, pulling her emotions back from the brink, and finally spoke. Mark, I was broken, but I still want to try. If only to know for certain that there's a chance for something good. Mark's smile deepened, becoming genuinely warm. We will try together. He moved his hand, finally, placing it gently beside hers on the table, offering connection without demanding it. Emily felt a small shiver, but she didn't retreat, welcoming the safe, solid presence next to her own. A fleeting gust of air rushed through the door as a customer left, carrying the clean scent of rain and petroleum, causing Emily to shiver slightly. She realized every sensory detail, the cold air, the warm coffee. The distant sounds was magnifying the significance of this moment. Every shadow, every flicker of light, felt like an accomplice to her shifting emotions. Emily, I need to ask you something vital, Mark said slowly, his eyes holding hers hostage. Are you ready for a true beginning? Not just testing the waters, but starting over, truly over, with everything we've been through forming the foundation. Emily held his gaze, silence stretching between them. She searched his voice for any trace of the evasive man he'd been, finding only hope, resolve, sincerity, and patience. She inhaled, her heart beating fast but steady, and finally offered a fragile, accepting smile. Yes, I am ready. Let's start over. For real. In that instant, the cafe seemed to brighten, the music swelling into a soft, gentle crescendo. The clinking of cups sounded like applause for their decision. Emily felt a rush of lightness, relief, and pure, exhilarating anticipation. She knew the next steps were terrifyingly unknown, but at least, they were moving forward together, and that was the only truth that mattered. She rested her hand fully on the mug, closing her eyes briefly, letting the scent of coffee, the music, and the light wash over her. She drank in the fullness of the moment, marking it as a memory she would carry forever. Mark sat motionless, his gaze filled with pure devotion and profound remorse, a silent vow never to let her go again. They remained, two figures united in quiet intensity, allowing the world to fade around their shared, fragile moment, a quiet, powerful vow in the vast, uncaring heart of New York City. Emily and Mark remained locked in their fragile truce across the table, the soft amber halo of the lamp illuminating their faces, highlighting every etched line of worry, every unspoken emotion. Despite the verbal promise to start over, the air was thick, far from settled. Both felt the profound weight of caution and the lingering sense of dread as if the past hadn't truly departed, but were simply lurking just out of sight, breathing down their necks. Emily, I know tonight is just the very first step, but can you trust me completely? Can you let yourself? Mark's voice was low, heavy with anxiety, the question a risky gamble. He searched her eyes, finding a reflection of his own mixed emotions, hope, fear, and a fierce defensive instinct. Emily dropped her gaze slightly, her finger tracing a small, absent circle on the rim of the coffee mug. Mark, I want to. God, I desperately want to, but I'm still terrified. Terrified that we'll end up right back where we were, that I'll be broken again, she admitted, her voice trembling but brutally honest. In that moment of stark vulnerability, Emily felt impossibly weak, yet fiercely brave, a conflict between the urge to bolt and the need to finally move forward. Mark closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them, the look was one of absolute resolve. Emily, I get it. I do. And I don't expect you to forget anything that happened. I just need you to give me the space to prove to you that I'm capable of being the man you deserve this time. A soft, sharp rap on the outer window, perhaps just the wind or a branch, made Emily jump. The cafe interior remained utterly still, broken only by the low jazz and the faint scent of rain and asphalt seeping in. The suddenness underscored the tension, reminding Emily that this night was a critical pivot point, a moment they absolutely had to face together. Mark leaned in closer, lowering his voice to an intimate whisper. Emily, we start with the smallest things. A day, a conversation, a simple gesture, one step at a time, no rushing, but complete and total authenticity. Emily nodded, her heart still hammering, a strange blend of anxiety and excitement. She felt the enormous burden of the past and the exhilarating pull of the future merging into every breath. She knew that any action taken now would leave an indelible mark, one that could be either beautiful or profoundly painful. You know, Emily finally said after a suspended moment, her voice gaining strength, I still remember those days we had, the joy, and even the stupid, petty fights. I can't pretend otherwise. I'm still in love with you, Mark. Her admission was fragile, but her eyes shone with absolute commitment. Mark's face softened, his eyes lighting up like the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement outside. Emily, hearing you say that makes me both the happiest and the most terrified man alive. But I know this much. I can't afford to lose this chance again. Emily closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, feeling Mark's presence and his intense sincerity, a steadfast love that had somehow survived the wreckage. She opened her eyes, looking at him, and in that charged instant, all the paralyzing fear and anxiety seemed to melt away, yielding to an authentic connection and a fierce, nascent hope. Outside, the indifferent churn of New York continued, but inside the tiny cafe, everything was quiet, giving space for two people to learn how to trust, how to forgive, and how to begin again. Emily felt every passing second was precious, and though she didn't know what lay ahead, she was ready to face it hand in hand. This moment was more than just a reunion. It was the painful first step toward repairing what was broken, confronting old wounds, and forging a bond that had the potential to be stronger than before. Emily knew that tonight wasn't just about love, it was about courage, forgiveness, and the resolute decision not to miss each other again. Emily and Mark sat across from each other, but the air was charged. The distance between them wasn't the hesitant shyness of a first meeting. It was a tight, electric tension, the kind you feel right before a major confrontation, something important, inevitable. Emily, Mark began, his voice low, a noticeable catch in his throat. There's something I have to tell you, and it's not easy. He took a deep breath, locking eyes with her. His gaze was earnest, but etched with worry. During the time I was away, things happened that I never told you about. I'm afraid it's going to disappoint you. Emily closed her eyes for a fleeting second, trying to steady the frantic rhythm of her heart. She realized that even as they tried to rebuild, the past held unresolved secrets, and tonight was the moment everything would finally come into the light. Mark, you know what? I'm ready to hear it all. Whatever went down, I need to understand. If we're going to start over, there can't be any secrets left, Emily said, her voice slow, deliberate, and fiercely resolute. Her eyes held a mixture of toughness and tenderness, reflecting a courage she hadn't felt before. Mark lowered his head, gathering a long, shaky breath. He began to recount the months they'd been apart, to bad decisions, the people, and the circumstances that had forced him to leave without a proper explanation. Every word he spoke was like a heavy stone dropping, painful but absolutely necessary. Emily listened, absorbing every shade of emotion in his voice: fear, regret, loneliness, and the love that had clearly never faded. Tears silently tracked down her cheeks, but she didn't turn away. Instead, she sat still, taking in the truth, feeling both the agony and a strange sense of relief all at once. When Mark finally stopped, the space in the cafe felt absolutely silent. The soft jazz music played on, but it seemed too distant to fill the emotional chasm between them. Slowly, Emily reached across the table and took Mark's hand, her heart flooding with forgiveness and a surge of hope. Mark, I get it, we can't change the past, but I want to try with you, even knowing there will be painful moments, even knowing we have to face all of it, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. If we take the next step together, everything will be different. Mark squeezed her hand, his eyes glistening in the warm, golden light of the table lamp. His voice was deep and reassuring. Emily, I promise, this time, I won't let you get hurt again. No matter what happens, no matter how big the challenge is, I'm here, I'm staying with you. A gust of wind blew hard against the window, carrying the scent of rain and wet asphalt. Emily shivered, but this time it was from anticipation and excitement, not fear. She realized that while there were many unknowns ahead, they were truly ready to confront the past and step into the future together. In that moment, the cafe felt warmer. The jazz, the amber glow, and the smell of coffee merged into a symphony of emotion, underscoring that Emily and Mark had found each other again, but this time, with maturity, courage, and true commitment. Emily took a deep, steadying breath. Feeling the powerful connection with Mark, her heart was both relieved and anxious. She knew the next steps wouldn't be easy, but at least they wouldn't be walking alone, and that was all that truly mattered. Emily and Mark sat across from each other, still hand in. The amber light from the small table lamp bathed their faces, illuminating every resolved contour, every emotion finally processed. The hesitation was gone. The cautious reserve had vanished, replaced by a potent, undeniable connection and a quiet, fierce determination. Emily, we finally made it back here. Together, Mark whispered, his voice deep and warm, his eyes shimmering in the lamplight. He squeezed her hand gently, pouring all his sincerity and rediscovered love into the gesture. Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with a joyful, almost nervous anticipation. We did, and this time, we don't let go. No matter what chaos is waiting outside, no matter how life tries to challenge us, we walk through it side by side. Mark nodded, his eyes bright, reflecting the elongated streaks of streetlights on the wet street outside. I swear to you, Emily, I won't leave you again. I'll be here, present, no matter how hard the truth gets, or how difficult the road ahead is. In that moment, the entire cafe felt suspended in time. The soft, familiar jazz swelled, but to Emily, the music was the rhythm of her own heart, harmonizing with her breath and every surging emotion. She realized that every agonizing failure, every mistake of the past, had merely served as a brutal, necessary lesson. They were standing at a new starting line, wiser, more courageous, and loving with a renewed, absolute clarity. Emily gripped Mark's hand firmly, inhaling deeply, absorbing the totality of the moment, the golden light, the rich coffee scent, the faint sound of rain, and their synced heartbeats. She knew this night wasn't just a reunion. It was the true, hard-won beginning. Mark leaned closer, his voice low and earnest. Emily, I want us to stop just talking about the future. I want us to simply live every moment together. Whether it's days of quiet peace or overwhelming challenge, I need you to know I'm right here. Emily nodded, absorbing every word, every steady beat of his heart against her palm. She smiled, her eyes shining, and in that instant, every fear, every nagging doubt, finally dissolved, replaced by a fresh, powerful, and complete sense of faith. Outside the window, New York continued its indifferent churn, cars rushing under flashing red lights, the soft patter of rain on the sidewalk. But inside the little cafe, time remained still. Emily and Mark had only each other, wrapped in a pervasive sense of forgiveness, love, and undeniable hope. Emily placed her free hand against Mark's chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm. She whispered, "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Mark smiled, squeezing her hand tighter, his voice deep and certain. "Yes, we are going to be okay, Emily, because this time, we're walking forward together." They sat in comfortable silence, allowing every emotion, sound, and light to blend a beautiful, fragile symphony of hope and reconciliation. This moment, for Emily and Mark, was the definitive end of the pain and the brave, resolute beginning of a new journey, one where everything could change, and they would never lose each other again. The jazz played softly on, the golden light held steady, and the scent of coffee lingered, and Emily knew that tonight would forever be the most beautiful memory, the true commencement of their future, together, whole and courageous.